asked for it that said that. He has it. He's written me and asked
What's
for it.
that? I forget.
Neil.
But they should still.
I raised you.
That's for ordinance?
I raised you.
Yeah. Good evening and welcome to the Scarborough Board of Education Workshop. The date is Thursday, February 15th, 2024. Can we call the attendance, please?
Yes, Mrs. Scammon,
She's excused.
Ms. Castellanos.
Here.
Mr. Kelleher.
Here.
Ms. Leong,
Here.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Here.
Mr. Pinion,
Here.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Here.
Ms. Leisure,
She's excused.
and Mr. Shumway.
He's excused. Perfect. Thank you. Can we everybody join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Wrong back. All right, agenda item 4.0 is a workshop. 4.1 is cybersecurity awareness. So we'll turn this over to Jen. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, for having me, and I think I know most of the people here, but just a little background on me. So I was here for 8 years. I left and went back to financial services from whence I came prior to being here. And then I've been back here for 2.5, 2+ years. So my background really is in financial services. I've worked for banks, credit unions, I've worked for software development companies that do banking software. And that's kind of how I sort of fell accidentally into the cybersecurity piece of this. So you can imagine in banks and credit unions, very highly regulated environments, a lot of government mandates, and that's a lot. I brought sort of a lot of that back with me. I brought it the first time and then kind of brought it back with me when I came back to work in the town. So a lot of what you're going to see, we probably have a more stringent cybersecurity policy and cybersecurity program in Scarborough, just because, we obviously want to be safe and secure. And we have a lot of folks on our staff who are very aware of the dangers and the threats. And it's interesting because I participate in a group, the Maine Educational Tech Directors Association in Maine. And I've been giving presentations about cybersecurity as of late, because we've partnered with CISA/Homeland Security to try to get a lot of folks, tech directors, staffs educated in Maine. And it is surprising how many people really don't know what they should be doing. They're not as aware as they should be. So what we're going to talk about tonight is just basically the state of cybersecurity, what it looks like in the K-12 tech sector right now. And part of that is what the threat landscape is, what different kinds of threats we have. We always say, you can do your best. You can try, to protect your environment every way you can. It's not necessarily a matter of, if it will happen, it's probably when it will happen. And then we'll talk about risk mitigation, things that we do now. And I am going to leave that intentionally vague, just because this is a public forum. So if you have any specific questions about things we do, please, get in touch with me afterwards. And then we'll have just an open Q&A. So right now, and this is taken from various sources, a lot of this information came from a study that was done by a group called K-12 Dive. And they did a fairly intensive study last year of K-12s across the US, and how many have been hit with ransomware attacks. Now, this is just ransomware. One of the things I like to point out here is K-12, in less than 3 years, they've been victim to over 319 ransomware attacks. Number one, that's just the attacks that were reported. There's probably a huge multiple of 319 of actual attacks that happened. Why don't people report them? Sometimes they're embarrassed. Sometimes they, don't think that they kind of fall on the scale of reportable attacks. Sometimes they don't even know that they've been attacked. And this is over a period of 3 years. So one of the things that actually I'm going to emphasize there is in a period between January and early September of 2023, there had been approximately 109 ransomware attacks against K-12s in the US. That same period in 2018, there were only 16 attacks. So you can see how the bad actors are ramping up attacks, particularly against K-12s. Why are they doing that? Because K-12s are data-rich environments. And because a lot of the folks who work there in the tech departments, we're very fortunate because we're shared service. So we have a staff that's dedicated to technology and, to our department and specifically to cybersecurity. But there's a lot of folks out there, I meet a lot of my colleagues who also do bus duty. And then they got to run out and do lunch duty, and then they're running back and trying to do IT. So I think that's part of the reason why you're seeing a lot of folks target K-12s, because it's data rich. There's kind of poor data hygiene in a lot of instances, and they don't have a lot of money to staff up and actually purchase the systems that they need to protect their environments. So in 2023, and this is not just in K-12, so now we're moving into another report from IBM Security. IBM Security reported that in 2023, the average downtime resulting from a ransomware attack was 11.6 days. So you think about if your school district had to be closed for 11 days. Sorry, students, you can't come to school. We don't have, our systems aren't online. We don't have Google. We don't have our security systems, our alarm systems, our HVAC systems, et cetera. This happened in 2023. This happened in New Mexico. This happened in 2022 in LA. The entire LA Unified School District had to shut down for a number of days. It happened in Nantucket. So it does happen to K-12s, and it happens frequently. And only 1 in 3 of the breaches were identified by the organization's own team. So essentially what that says to me is 2 out of 3 were identified because they actually had data exfiltration, or they had some other issue happen within their systems that notified them that there was a problem. I should back up to say, why are we having this presentation? I mean, I think it's just good for everybody to kind of have an overview and, general knowledge of how, we protect our systems here, the threats that face us, but also it's very good for when we are doing surveys on a national scale to show that we have tried to educate our senior leaders. And then within the insurance, we have cyber insurance policies, and within cyber insurance policies, we will be asked about whether or not you guys have received any kind of training. So consider this your training. It helps with our premiums. Yeah. So the average cost, and again, this is IBM Security report. So this is across all industries, not just focused on K-12s. The average cost of a data breach in the US is $4.45 million. And why is that? That seems like a really high amount of money, but when you start thinking about what rolls up into that, it's legal fees, right? It's ID theft protection. So when you get notified, as I'm sure unfortunately we all have been called by somebody, your credit card number's been compromised or your social security number's been compromised, and they say, we'll pay for your identity theft protection credit monitoring for 2 years, that's all part of the cost. Public relations, it can be a total public relations nightmare. I will give you guys some examples from other school districts of how this could kind of roll out ad infinitum for a long period of time too. It's not just sort of like a finite time period of, all right, once we get to August, we'll be done with this. Some of these, issues kind of go on and on. Forensic analysis, system cleanup, you might have to hire people to come in, actually replace your systems, reconfigure your systems, etc. The average cost of a data breach, and again, this is across all industries, not just K-12s, but is $165 per record. So if you think about how many records we as a school district would have on-prem at any given time, you're talking about way in the tens of millions of dollars. So what does the threat landscape look like right now? And this is not just, again, related to K-12, it's kind of across the board, across any industry. Social engineering, some of these you guys have probably heard of. We'll go through them just so you have a better idea of what I'm talking about. Phishing, everybody's heard of phishing, right? I hope you haven't been a victim of it. Ransomware, supply chain attacks, cloud exploitation, AI-powered attacks. We're seeing a lot more of that now too. And I think that's probably going to really be sort of on our threat horizon, where we're going to see a lot more of that, and bad actors are going to use AI in a variety of ways we'll talk about. So this is social engineering, and a lot of times what they do is they'll take these different attack vectors. You'll get social engineering, you'll get phishing, you'll get ransomware. It'll all combine into one, sort of like, I call it the combo plate of malware, right? The combo plate of malware attack. So this is an actual example from our school district. What we are seeing a lot more of now, and there's like different trends that kind of come and go over the years. This year's trend seems to be the bad actors will legitimately hack into another school district's email. And they will take it over. The school district, we're finding 9 times out of 10 doesn't even know that they've infiltrated some of these emails. So we have received emails from West Franklin, Kansas, and from Messinic Regional School District in New Hampshire, not to call them out specifically because we're getting them from all over the country. And what happens is they take over these legitimate accounts. And so when the emails come in, because if they're using a spoofed email address or it has like a strange header, most of the time our filters will filter it out. So we won't even see it. But because these are coming from legitimate email addresses, they're coming through. So our recipients on our end, our staff will get this email saying, you have a document that's shared out to you. Well, we can go in and we can take those emails out, right? Especially as soon as we're notified, we'll go in and we'll pull them out. But what happens is the document that's shared out, we can't pull out of Google. So as a user, you'll go into your drive and there will be this shared with me file, right? And it says, click here. So when the users click on it, it hyperlinks to a Google's form. And typically, I won't go into the minutia of how that happens, but typically these forms feed back to one place. And it's asking people, fill your email address, it looks legit, and your password. Essentially what it's doing is harvesting your credentials, right? So it's gonna actually dump it all in, and whoever's receiving all of these now has your user ID and password. And what I always tell people, do not reuse your passwords, okay? And this is one of the reasons why. Because if you keep using your password for various things and somebody happens to get a hold of it, they can very easily, now they can go through your email, they can figure out where you bank, they can figure out where you've gone to the doctor, they can figure out where you shop, and they can reuse that password and user ID. And what happened in New Haven Public Schools, and I'm not relating this to that specific attack, we don't know exactly how they were attacked, but last year in May of 2023, New Haven School District, their COO was phished. Bad actors gained access to the COO's email and they just sat there for a period of time. From all the accounts that I've read, it sounds like it was at least 3 or 4 weeks. So the COO had no idea that they were in there. The IT staff didn't know. And they just watched all these emails going back and forth from the COO to various vendors. And they figured out, where did they bank? Who were their vendors? What are their account numbers? All these things that they were emailing back and forth. Eventually, they learned enough to be able to impersonate some of the vendors and some of the banking staff. Then they started authorizing electronic transfers out of the funds, the school funds, and they knew enough to know which accounts and which line items had actually been approved in the budget. So it didn't look odd, and this happened for a couple of weeks. They ended up stealing $6 million, over $6 million, and the only way, most of it was meant for their busing contract. The only way they figured it out was because the busing company finally called them and said, where's our money? We thought we were gonna get paid. They said, well, we've made 3 payments to you. And so then they started panicking and backtracking. They called the FBI. They have gotten half of it back to date, but it's still under review and they're still researching and trying to get the money back. So they think that they're probably going to be out a couple $1 million. And this is KnowBe4 is a company that I worked with in my past life. And this just was an interesting statistic. They are an anti-phishing company. They do phishing tests and phishing drills with, various organizations. And education, where I circled right there. So this is the percentage of people, you can see the number of employees. So the size of the organization matters. And This is the percentage of users who on the first time they were phished actually clicked on it. So over 30%. For our staff, it would be, you know, around 30%. Of people that got this phishing email, didn't know what they were looking at. Now, at that point, you can get one of those credential harvesting emails, which hopefully at that point they go, that seems weird. Or sometimes when you click on it, it just dumps a malware payload into your system and you don't know. And that's likely what happened, I would guess, in New Haven. So ransomware, again, is sort of like a combo plate. They will deliver this via, you know, phishing. They can backdoor into your systems. There's a lot of different ways that you can get infected with ransomware. But it's malware that limits or prevents users. So essentially, it'll lock up your systems. It'll lock up your files, your folders. It will sometimes hop from server to server. It will lock up those servers. It usually is very invasive. So they try to target somebody who has very high level administrative access within your network, because then as they access these different servers, that's how it's getting passed from server to server, router to router, whatever within your network. And then they demand payment. So a good example of this, 80% of lower education providers reported that they were hit by ransomware. That number seems out of whack with the first number that we looked at. And from everything that I read, what I could put together is 80% have been hit with it. They haven't necessarily been infected with it, right? Their systems may have rebuffed it. And the root causes, we talked about that, exploited vulnerabilities, compromised credentials. So compromised credentials might be if they've credential harvested you, they now have your user ID and password. Exploited vulnerabilities could be anything from you know, unpatched systems, not updated systems. You know, when your laptop turns off and it says, I need to apply updates and security patches, that's what it's doing to apply the latest, greatest antivirus signatures. And then 30% of all of that originated from email payloads. So this is why it's very important. This is why we do phishing tests routinely throughout the school district to make sure that people are very aware of how vulnerable they are. And I would say, you know, your first line of defense, your people, because you can put anything you want in place. And if you have, they call it a 0-day attack, where, you know, there's whole villages in, you know, formerly Eastern Bloc countries that the whole village is just employed creating malware. That like literally high-rise buildings, just of people creating malware all day, every day. So it's very hard to stay up with the antivirus signatures for them. So this actually happened a year ago, February of 2023. Minneapolis Public Schools and the Medusa ransomware, they have funky, interesting names for themselves. The Medusa ransomware group infiltrated the Minneapolis Public School systems, and they demanded $1 million in ransom. So what happened is people come into school, they turn on their computers, and this pops up. Okay, and this is a countdown. If you notice, it's really like, they did give them some time, like, oh, well, you can add a day to think about it, but you have to pay us $50,000 for that. You can, we'll delete all your data for $100,000. Or you can download all your data for $100,000. So, you know, you had options, and they had a countdown, you know, of how long they were gonna hold off until they did whatever they were gonna do. So Minneapolis refused to pay. And this is what we are routinely told, right? Any kind of training you get from the FBI and banking and Secret Service, right? They always tell you don't pay the ransom because that money just goes to fund more of these attacks. And there's no guarantee that they're not going to release your data anyway. You could pay the $1 million, you could get the key. They take your $1 million, they give you the key, and they release the data. So they refuse to pay. Medusa then put together a 51-minute video of 143 gigs of data from 190,000 files that they stole. They didn't post this on the dark web, okay? They went out to Telegraph, which is like an instant messaging service, right, out in the public, and they put it on a loop. So anybody, anywhere could just log into this and see all this data. Now, what was in there? It was confidential restricted files. A lot of it was personnel files. So what you're gonna see is some people took screenshots from it. Somebody would make a complaint about a teacher or a staff person or another student, and these were not legitimized, okay? They just had to log them. They had to put them in a spreadsheet. The spreadsheets were released. So imagine, this person now has been accused of something, or there's been a complaint launched against them. It's never been confirmed, it's just logged somewhere, but now this is out in the public for everybody to see. It was personnel files, financial information, it was confidential information, people's names, bank accounts, social security numbers. It was confidential files from the therapists in school. So the kids who were going and trying to get help from social counselors, now their information about whatever's happening to them at home is public for everybody to see. Talk about traumatizing, right? This is an excerpt. I won't even read it because it's, but you can see it's about, it's logged in a file. It's being investigated, so it's not confirmed or anything. But this is what was released to the public for everybody to look at. Now, these people, because you can see the names are blacked out, but all those names were out there for everybody to see. And these people, you know, are the attorneys in Minnesota, when you start reading up the follow-ups on these, they are blown away. They don't really know what to do because they're like, we've never seen anything like this before, because this is gonna follow these people forever, right? These kids, these staff people, and so parents are understandably upset, staff people are upset, they're like, I'll never get another job. Kids are like, I'll never get into college, and it's still going on now. In Tucson, the Royal Ransomware Group, this is back in January 2023, they hacked into the Tucson Unified School District. They stole data, same kind of data. I think this was mostly like financial data, personnel records related to 29,000 individuals. Everybody came into work and found ransom notes left on the printers. So as they went to print things, there's the ransom note. It was an unspecified amount. This investigation, I think, is still ongoing, so they haven't said how much it was, but they refused to pay. So initially, when you start reading back through all of the newspaper articles about it, they denied that anything had happened. Oh, no, this didn't happen. And then the Royal Ransomware Group decided to upload to the dark web, and they took medical records, disciplinary files, social security numbers, all bank information, and just loaded it up there for people to buy. And now Tucson has admitted that there was a breach, and they're saying it's going to cost millions for them to recover from this. They have already asked for a 20% increase in their budget just to try to improve security measures. So a supply chain attack. This is a totally different kind of attack. We were always worried about this working in the financial industry. You're always worried about this because you have so many vendors and there's so many backdoors into different systems. There was a supply chain attack back probably 4 or 5 years ago with British Airways. And it was their vendor that provided their payment system for ticketing. And so as people were getting their tickets, they were entering all their credit card information and all of their personal data. And that system had been compromised. And so all of that information was being fed out to the bad actors. This happened recently for anybody who in December got a notification about MoveIt. MoveIt was a file transfer system that got hacked, and there was a malware payload dumped into it. Well, because everybody in the world pretty much used MoveIt to move files back and forth, everybody was unknowingly infected with this. And then this was attributed to I call them the CLOP ransomware. It's CL0P is what they are, ransomware group. So over 2,000 organizations and more than 62 million people were affected. And specifically in Maine, 1.2 million people. And I think probably everybody here had their data.
Almost everyone in the state.
Yeah.
The state of Maine.
And this was the ransomware note. So what happened was they actually infiltrated so many organizations and got so much data that they kind of said, well, come to our website and find out what to do if you think you've been infected. So then they give you like step-by-step instructions. Email our team, unlock, and then pay us in Bitcoin and whatever. Cloud exploitation, so we're seeing this is also on the rise, like cloud exploitation wasn't really a thing, like 10 years ago. And now it's really weaponizing cloud services. So it's taking phishing, ransomware, credential stuffing, supply chain attacks, and moving it to the cloud so that it's actually, easier to infiltrate organizations. It's easier to infect different systems, ecosystems. And then backdoor access, sometimes again, all of this can be kind of combined into one thing. If you remember years ago, AWS had a breach and that was a backdoor access to cloud. DDoS attacks, we've been hit with a DDoS attack. We got hit a couple of years ago with a DDoS attack, and we have since taken some steps to mitigate it. But for us, the danger at the time was that we're on a shared service network. So when they hit schools, all of our services flipped over to the town and we brought public safety down. So we've since put measures in place to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And DDoS attacks, I say this publicly, but if you just Google it and find out DDoS attacks, you can just go on the dark web and buy them for like $50 an hour and launch them. And then insider threats, of course, that's a threat no matter what kind of attack vector you're talking about, no matter what kind of organization you're talking about. It's always, again, people. People are your first line of defense, making sure they're educated, making sure that they understand the vulnerabilities, and making sure that they're taking the appropriate measures to protect themselves and the organization from these kinds of attacks. AI-powered attacks. So this is something that has really come to the surface in the past 12 months. And I will say AI has some uses, some good uses. We've seen some interesting developments in AI in terms of special services and some other things. But it also can be used as a weapon because it's so fast and it's becoming so good that it uses machine learning to analyze targets. So when you're talking about potential phishing targets, you're talking about, backdoor attacks, supply chain attacks, whatever, it's analyzing very quickly the best techniques to use against certain organizations and organizations that potentially are data rich. So in an AI powered attack, we just talked about how it can be used to develop malware. It can craft phishing messages. So gone are the days where you would get phishing messages. And it was funny because we were just talking about it. Oh, if you write a note to somebody or you write a paper or something, the messages that the phishing messages we used to get say things like very broken English and it doesn't really make sense. And it's like, oh, that's obviously not really from Diane, right? Diane can actually craft a message better. These ones are really well written now, right? I mean, and you can type in craft a message from a superintendent, craft a message from a CFO, whatever, and it will use the appropriate lingo and language. Deep fakes, I think y'all have seen that. There was a really famous one. Tom Cruise looked like he was endorsing something, or there's a million of them out there now, and they're really worried about deep fakes now in a year of an election, right? And so a lot of this is kind of rising to the surface because we have election, you've got Ukraine, you've got Palestine and Israel, and you've got, a lot of other issues happening in this country. So with that sort of all hanging in the balance, whether or not any of these world leaders are actually saying what they look like they're saying on the internet has to be taken into question, right? Because the deep fakes are really, really good now. Automating and scaling attacks. So you can use AI to scale your attack back or up, or, again, figure out what's the best way to hit an organization. And then of course, password cracking, right? Because it used to take forever. And I think hopefully people don't raise your hands, but how many people used to use the name of your cat or, password 123 or whatever.
That's the thing.
And so, I mean, now password cracking, AI has made it so automated and so easy to crack passwords that you have to have, a huge string of numbers, characters, uppercase, lowercase, et cetera, and, 8 to 14 digits or more is probably the safest. but that's hard to remember. So that's I think why we see people reusing their passwords. So just a few other things to keep you, in case I haven't scared the bejeebus out of everybody yet, a few other things that keep me up at night. These are Internet of Things, so IoT vulnerabilities. What is your washing machine doing right now while you're not home? What's your refrigerator doing? All these things that you have hooked up. What's your Nest doing? What's your alarm system doing? All these things that are hooked up to the internet, that can all be hacked now. And so people can raise the temperature of your house. They can make the alarm systems go off. They can shut your refrigerator down. There's a lot of scary things that can happen. Hardware, software updates. So sometimes what we've seen in the past is we've gotten alerts that the updates actually contain the malware. So you're updating your system and you're unknowingly actually applying, malware to your system. Hacktivism, that's when somebody is hacking into systems or stealing data, but it's activism. It's for a specific cause. So that's kind of harder to combat because they're not asking for money. They don't care about that. They care about making sure that you're vulnerable. They care about making sure other people know what the data is that you're storing. Automotive hacking. So, as our cars are more and more connected to the internet and we have self-driving cars, hack into them and they can take the car over. And then the dark web. So dark web's not a new thing. And I thought we'd go on a little tour of the dark web. Ooh, just so, because everybody talks about the dark web and it's like this thing out there, and really, like, how many people have gone out to the dark web and have seen it? It sounds like a super scary thing. Well, it's Tor, right? So the onion router. So if you bounce through various computers, and originally this was not created to be a super scary, malicious thing, right? It was created, my understanding, way back when they were trying to, you had journalists from war-torn countries or countries where, politically they were insecure. And so you had journalists and average people who were trying to report out. And the only way that they could really do that was if it was completely anonymous. So they tried to create this to anonymize people's activity and communications. So of course, though, that created also a great environment for people to sell things that they probably shouldn't be selling. So I attended, let me just be straight up here. I attended a webinar from an cyber insurance company called Beasley. And it was their tour of the dark web. And I was like so fascinated by this that I stole some screenshots and I give them credit down there on the bottom. But I'm not going to go out and, look for weapons and whatever on the dark web. So I thought it was probably safer to just not reinvent the wheel there. So here's the black hole market. And these are actually screenshots. Like these people went out to the dark web and took screenshots. So you can see, like, you can buy all kinds of stuff here. This is credit card information. So $35, I don't know if you can really see this. Plus, this one says you get name, address, and date of birth with the credit card number. Another one is, it's the CCV market. So you can get the security code along with the credit card.
What if they send you your own information? That'd be a
You got figured.
These are medical records. Okay, so here's somebody selling a whole bunch of medical records. Refund policy. If you're not satisfied with the product, you can return it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and it's in
I did
stock,
ours.
so this is great. And this list includes name, date of birth, address, social security numbers, blah, blah, blah. And then, this is interesting, they say, if you really just want to drill down into specific records, for example, who in the USA has HIV,
Oh, Jesus.
you can just buy that, just let them know. And it's only $110. This is bank account information. I love this one though, because they rate people like, oh, this guy only has a 1-star rating, 2-star rating. And here's another one where they rate. Now this is malware as a service. So you can go out and you can buy hacking tools. You can buy, actually, you can pay somebody to do it for you if you're lazy and you don't want to hack somebody's stuff, or you can buy the code to go out and steal people's stuff, right? So anyway, that was just like a quick little tour through the dark web. There's lots of other stuff on there. You can buy anything you could possibly imagine. The Silk Road is what they call it. There's a really good book about it. If you ever want to read it, I can forward it on to you, but it's fascinating.
You can.
Yeah.
You don't
it's-
go to no.
It's a really good.
What is it?
Silk Road.
What would you say?
Kingpin is about.
Kingpin, yeah, about the Silk Road
For the Silk.
and how it was created and.
Okay.
So Kingpin is the name of the book?
Mhm.
Very good.
Okay, so risk mitigation, like now that everybody's like, I'm just gonna, unplug and go off the grid. There are things that we do and things that you can do at home. And, I always try to, when I give these presentations, I always try to tell people like, this isn't just for the organization, right? This is to make people aware for their own family.